Alright, welcome back everyone. Today we'll be looking at the second part of the factors affecting eyewitness testimony, which is anxiety. The first part of this series was leading questions. Remember, that was the car crashing and the surveillance camera experiments. Now we're going to be looking at anxiety. The way this lesson is structured is that we're first going to look at how anxiety has a negative effect on recall, how it can have a positive effect on recall, how we can combine all of this into something called the yerks-dodson law, looking at how unusualness of information can affect memory recall, or recall in general, and some problems with this yerks-dodson law, which is also called the inverted U theory. So first we might want to define what anxiety actually is. So it is a mental state. It is a mental state that is arousal and includes feeling of extreme concern and tension. That's the psychological side. On the physiological side, it causes changes such as heart rate, dilated pupils, and increase in sweat. So let's ask the question, does anxiety increase or decrease eyewitness testimony accuracy? And let's build a case for both of these arguments. So if we say that anxiety might increase recall or accuracy, so we might say that, well, pupils dilate, meaning more light can enter our eyes, meaning we can probably absorb more information from our visual surrounding. That should improve memory, right? What about the increased heart rate? That might, pump more oxygen, better oxygen supply, provide better oxygen supply to the brain, which could improve memory consolidation. So there is a case to be made that maybe, anxiety can improve our memory. What about anxiety decreasing our ability to remember? Well, maybe because if we panic under anxiety, that might give us tunnel vision. And tunnel vision might mean that we can only focus on certain things and overlook other things. So maybe the important information is just completely missed from our awareness simply because of panic. Let's look at some evidence that says that actually our ability to remember is reduced by anxiety. So anxiety is bad for our memory. Again, we're looking at Loftus, this time 1978, all by himself. What he did, he asked participants to listen to a conversation in the next room about either equipment failure, and then a man with greasy hands and a pen walks out. Or they heard a hostile encounter, breaking glass, furniture being knocked over, and then a man with a knife covered in blood walks out. Okay? So the second one is supposed to cause anxiety. The question was, when given 50 photographs of the person who had walked past, would they be able to identify the man who walked out correctly? So the greasy hands with a pen versus the knife covered in blood. And the results was that the greasy pan guy was recognized correctly 49% of the time, while the man covered in blood with a knife was recognized only correctly 33% of the time. So the idea here is that there was something called a weapon focus. The anxiety induced by the knife took away attention from the man's face. They were too worried about the knife that they forgot to actually look at the person holding the knife. And therefore, they had less of a chance to correctly identify the man versus if they didn't hold a weapon, but it was just a benign pen. There was a meta-analysis done by Duffenbacher, 1983, on how anxiety affects memory, and he agrees with Loftus, saying, yeah, in his research he also found that eyewitness testimonies are reduced in accuracy under fear or under anxiety. This is the second experiment that looks at how anxiety reduces accuracy of eyewitness testimony. This one was by Peters, 1988, and the procedure was that participants simply went to get an injection. And there was not just a nurse who was administering the injection, but also a researcher sitting in the room. And the results were that participants, they were more likely to remember the face of the researcher than the nurse. So the weapon focus here is the needle, so they were focusing on the needle, wielded by the nurse. Therefore, they couldn't remember the nurse. But the researcher was neutral, not holding the weapon, and therefore they were more likely to remember the researcher. Let's look at some evidence now that suggests that anxiety actually increases the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. This one comes from Julie and Kutzel, 1986, and they took 13 witnesses of a real shooting, and asked them 4 months after the crime some leading questions and trying to see whether they can tease the false memories out of them with these leading questions. So the recall was generally really high, so 88% of the information was recalled correctly. But those with the highest reported levels of stress gave the most accurate responses. So apparently, being fearful in that moment helped them remember the scene better later on. So the conclusion is that anxiety does not seem to have the same effect in real life as it does in the lab, right? So it looked like, since this was done in the real life, maybe anxiety works differently compared to the other studies that we just discussed before that were both conducted in the lab. And this is also a direct criticism of lab studies on eyewitness testimony, that they have a low external validity because the events that people experience in the lab are obviously not real, and they know that, and therefore it's not really creating real anxiety like these people here at the shooting would have had. The second study that suggests that anxiety increases accuracy of eyewitness testimony comes from Christensen and Hubinet, 1993. And what they did, just like the one before, they asked people who experienced a real event, this time 110 victims of a real bank robbery, some questions. And there were two groups. The ones that were threatened by the robbers directly, for example, having the gun pointed at you, versus simple bystanders that were just standing at the sides and observing the event happening. And the results are that the group one, so the threatened ones, were more accurate in the description of the bank robbers than the bystanders. Interesting. So heightened anxiety may increase eyewitness testimony accuracy. Now, it doesn't make any sense to have research studies point in the exact opposite direction of each other. Does anxiety now increase or decrease the accuracy of eyewitness testimony? And this is where the yerks-dodson law comes into play. It says, yes, anxiety increases arousal and thus improves memory, but only up to a certain point, after which the memory decreases again, or the accuracy of memory decreases again. So anxiety can improve our attention, but too much anxiety causes tunnel vision. You start off here with low anxiety, and the eyewitness testimony accuracy is low. As you get more anxious, your accuracy increases, but too much will cause panic and tunnel vision, and therefore your eyewitness testimony accuracy goes down again. Leave a like if you liked it, subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when we drop a new video. Download these and many more slides for free, and consider supporting us on Patreon and get access to detailed mind maps and past exam revision content. If you're a teacher, get free access to ZenTeach, an online quizzing tool with ready-to-go multiple choice quizzes and automated feedback. Make sure to use this invite code, which is, like all links, in the video description below.